The People's Temple of the Disciples of Christ, originally People's Temple Full Gospel Church, and commonly shortened to People's Temple, was an American new religious organization which existed between 1954 and 1978 and was affiliated with the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Founded by Jim Jones in Indianapolis, Indiana, the People's Temple spread a message that combined elements of Christianity with communist and socialist ideology, with an emphasis on racial equality. After Jones moved the group to California in the 1960s and established several locations throughout the state, including its headquarters in San Francisco, the temple forged ties with many left-wing political figures and claimed to have 20,000 members, although 3,000 to 5,000 is more likely. The temple is best known for the events of November 18, 1978 in Guyana, when 909 people died in a mass suicide and mass murder at its remote settlement named Jonestown, as well as the murders of U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan and members of his visiting delegation at the nearby Port Kaituma airstrip. The incident at Jonestown resulted in the greatest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act prior to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Because of the killings in Guyana, the temple is regarded by scholars and by popular view as a destructive cult. Before he founded his church, Jim Jones had become enamored with communism, and he also was frustrated by the harassment which communists were being subjected in the U.S. during the Red Scare. This, among other things, provided a clerical inspiration for Jones, as he himself described it in a biographical recording. I decided, how can I demonstrate my Marxism? The thought was infiltrate the church, so I consciously made a decision to look into that prospect. Although Jones feared that he would end up being the victim of a backlash for being a communist, he was surprised when a Methodist superintendent, whom he had not met through the American Communist Party, helped him enter the church, despite his knowledge that Jones was a communist. In 1952, Jones became a student pastor in Somerset Southside Methodist Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, but left that church because it barred him from integrating African Americans into his congregation. In 1954, Jones founded his own church in a rented space in Indianapolis. At first, he named it the Community Unity Church. Jones had previously observed a faith healing service at the Seventh-day Baptist Church, which led him to conclude that such healings could attract people and generate income, which he could use to accomplish his social goals. Jones and the temple members knowingly faked healings because they found that the healings increased people's faith and generated financial resources, which they could use to help the poor and finance the church. These healings involved the use of chicken livers and other animal tissue, which Jones and Confederate temple members claimed were cancerous tissues, which had been removed from the bodies of the people who had been healed. In 1955, Jones bought his first church building, located in a racially mixed Indianapolis neighborhood. He first named his church Wings of Deliverance, and later that year, he renamed it to the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. Jones' healings and purported clairvoyant revelations attracted spiritualists. Jones was particularly effective at recruitment among the African American attendees at the conventions. Jones used the convention meetings with other Pentecostal speakers to gain wide publicity, and Jones continued to disguise the fact that he was using religion to further his political ideology. Those conventions drew as many as 11,000 attendees, as Jones and the other preachers conducted healings and impressed attendees by revealing private information, usually addresses, phone numbers, or social security numbers, which private detectives could easily discover beforehand. The temple hired African American preacher Archie E. James, who had earlier given up organized religion. Pastor E. James was one of the first to commit to Jones's socialist collective program. In 1959, the church joined the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and was renamed the People's Temple Christian Church Full Gospel. This affiliation was a successful attempt to both raise dwindling membership and restore the reputation of the organization. In February 1960, the temple opened a soup kitchen for the poor and expanded their social services to include rent assistance, job placement services, free canned goods, clothing, and coal for winter heating. Jones and his wife Merceline helped to increase the temple's soup kitchen service to an average of about 2,800 meals per month. The temple's public profile was further elevated when Jones was appointed to the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission. The new fiery rhetorical style that Devine had used in a sermon. His speech captivated members with lulls and crescendos, as Jones challenged individual members in front of the group. The speech also marked the beginning of the temple's underlying us versus them message. Jones carefully wove in that the temple's home for senior citizens was established on the basis from each according to his ability to each according to his need, quoting Karl Marx's critique of the Gotha program. He did so knowing that his Christian audiences would recognize the similarities with texts from Acts of the Apostles 4:34-35, which stated, quote, "Distribution was made to each as any had need," end quote. Jones would repeatedly cite that message to paint Jesus as a communist, while at the same time attacking much of the text of the Bible. The temple began tightening control over its organization, asking more of its members than did other churches. It required that members spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with its temple family rather than with blood relatives, the beginning of a process to wean members from outside contact and redirect their lives toward a total commitment to the temple and its goals. Jones began to offer a deal towards a socialist collective, which he called religious communalism, in which members would donate their material possessions to the temple in exchange for the temple meeting all of those members' needs. Pastor James was one of the first to commit. The temple had little luck converting most Midwesterners to communist ideals, even when disguised as religion. Admiring the 1959 Cuban Revolution, Jones traveled to the island nation in 1960 in an unsuccessful attempt to persuade poor black Cubans to move to his congregation. While temple aides complained privately, Jones said that the new message was needed to foster members' dedication to the temple's larger goals. He maintained such implications until the mid to late 1970s. In 1961, Jones claimed that he had a vision in which Indianapolis and Chicago were destroyed in a nuclear attack, convincing aides that the temple needed to look for a new location. A 1962 Esquire magazine article listed the 9 safest places to be in a nuclear war, with Belo Horizonte, Brazil, topping the list because of its location and atmospheric conditions. Jones traveled through Brazil from 1962 through early 1963. He requested money from the temple while in Rio de Janeiro, but the temple lacked adequate funds for such a request because of shrinking finances in Jones's absence. Jones sent a preacher that had become a follower in Brazil back to Indiana to help stabilize the temple. Jones returned to Indiana in 1963. Jones returned from Brazil in December 1963 to find People's Temple bitterly divided. Financial issues and a much smaller congregation forced Jones to sell the People's Temple church building and relocate to a smaller building nearby. To raise money, Jones briefly returned to the revival circuit, traveling and holding healing campaigns. After dealing with the issues at People's Temple, and possibly in part to distract from them, he told his Indiana congregation that the world would be engulfed by nuclear war on July 15, 1967. Leading to a new socialist Eden on Earth, and that the temple must move to Northern California for safety. With Jones's return, the majority of his congregation gradually returned to People's Temple, improving their financial situation. During 1964, Jones made multiple trips to California to locate a suitable location to relocate. In July 1965, Jones and his followers began moving to their new location in Redwood Valley, California, near the city of Ukiah. Jones' assistant pastor, Russell Winberg, strongly resisted Jones's effort to move the congregation and warned members of the People's Temple that Jones was abandoning Christianity. Winberg took over leadership of the Indianapolis church, where Jones departed. About 140 of Jones's most loyal followers made the move to California, while the rest remained behind with Winberg. In California, Jones was able to use his education degree from Butler University to secure a job as a history and government teacher at an adult education center in Ukiah. Jones used his position to recruit for People's Temple, teaching his students the benefit of Marxism and lecturing on religion. Jones planted loyal members of People's Temple in the classes to help him with recruitment. His efforts were successful, and Jones recruited 50 new members to People's Temple in the first few months. In 1967, Jones's followers persuaded another 75 members of the Indianapolis congregation to move to California. In 1968, the People's Temple, California location was admitted to the Disciples of Christ. Jones began to use the denominational connection to promote People's Temple as part of the 1.5 million member denomination. He played up famous members of the Disciples, including Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover, and misrepresented the nature of his position in the denomination. By 1969, Jones increased the membership in People's Temple, California to 300. Jones developed a theology that was significantly influenced by the teachings of the Latter Rain movement. William Branham, Father Divine, and infused with Jones's personal communist worldview. Jones referred to his belief as apostolic socialism. Following the relocation of the People's Temple to California, Jones began to gradually introduce the concept to his followers. According to religious studies professor Catherine Wessinger, Jones always spoke of the social gospel's virtues, but chose to conceal that his gospel was actually communism until he began to do so in sermons at the temple in the late 1960s. Jones taught that those who remained drugged with the opiate of religion had to be brought to enlightenment, which he defined as socialism. Jones asserted that traditional Christianity had an incorrect view of God. By the early 1970s, Jones began deriding traditional Christianity as flyaway religion, rejecting the Bible as being a tool to oppress women and non-whites. Jones referred to the traditional Christianity's view of God as a sky god, who was no God at all. Instead, Jones claimed to be following the true God, who created all things. Jones taught that ultimate reality was called the divine principle, and this principle was the true God. Jones equated the principle with love, and he equated love with socialism. Jones asserted he was a savior sent by the true God. Further attacking traditional Christianity, Jones authored and circulated a tract entitled, quote, "The Letter Killeth," end quote, criticizing the King James Bible and dismissing King James as a slave owner and a capitalist who was responsible for the corrupt translation of Scripture. Jones claimed he was sent to share the true meaning of the gospel which had been hidden by corrupt leaders. Jones rejected even the few required tenets of the Disciples of Christ denomination. Instead of implementing the sacraments as prescribed by the disciples, Jones followed Father Divine's Holy Communion practices. Jones created his own baptismal formula, baptizing his converts, quote, "in the holy name of socialism," end quote. While in the United States, Jones remained fearful of the public discovering the full extent of his communist views. He believed that if the true nature of his views became widely known, he would quickly lose the support of the political leaders, and even face the possibility of People's Temple being ejected from the Disciples of Christ. Jones also feared losing the church's tax-exempt status and having to report his financial dealings to the IRS. Jones took care to always couch his socialist views in religious terms, such as, quote, "apostolic social justice," end quote. Quote, "living the Acts of the Apostles," end quote, was his euphemism for living a communal lifestyle. Jones frequently warned his followers of an imminent apocalyptic genocidal race war and nuclear war. He claimed that Nazi fascists and white supremacists would put people of color into concentration camps. Jones said he was a messiah sent to save people by giving them a place of refuge in his church. Drawing on a prophecy in the book of Revelation, he taught that American capitalist culture was irredeemable Babylon. Explaining the nature of sin, Jones stated, quote, "If you're born in capitalist America, racist America, fascist America, then you're born in sin. But if you're born in socialism, you're not born in sin," end quote. He taught his followers the only way to escape the supposed imminent catastrophe was to accept his teachings, and that after the apocalypse was over, they would emerge to establish a perfect communist society. Jones increasingly used fear to control and manipulate his followers in California. Jones frequently warned his followers that there was an enemy seeking to destroy them. The identity of that enemy changed over time from the Ku Klux Klan to Nazis to redneck vigilantes, and finally the American government. He frequently prophesied that fires, car accidents, and death or injuries would come upon anyone unfaithful to him and his teachings. He constantly told his followers that they needed to be crusaders in promoting and fulfilling his beliefs. Through his tactics, he successfully implemented a communal lifestyle among his followers that was directed by him and his lieutenants, who were part of a committee called the Planning Commission. Jones, through the Planning Commission, began controlling all aspects of the lives of his followers. Members who joined People's Temple were required to turn over all their assets to the church in exchange for free room and board. Many members working outside of the temple were also required to turn over all of their income to be used for the benefit of the community. Jones directed groups of his followers to work on various projects to earn income for the People's Temple and set up an agricultural operation in Redwood Valley to grow food. Jones organized large community outreach projects, taking his followers by bus to perform community services across the region. The first known cases of serious abuse in the People's Temple arose in California as the Planning Commission carried out discipline against members who were not fulfilling Jones's vision or following the rules. Jones's control over the members of the People's Temple extended to their sex lives and who could be married. Some members were coerced to get abortions. Jones began to require sexual favors from the wives of some members of the church. Jones also raped several male members of his congregation. Members who rebelled against Jones's control were punished with reduced food rations, public ridicule and humiliations, and sometimes with physical violence. As the temple's membership grew, Jones created a security group to ensure order among his followers and to ensure his own personal safety. The group purchased security squad cars and armed their guards with rifles and pistols. Because of limited expansion in the Redwood Valley Ukiah area, it eventually seemed necessary to move the church's seat of power to an urban area. In 1970, the temple began holding services in San Francisco and Los Angeles. It established permanent facilities in those cities in 1971 and 72, respectively. In San Francisco, the temple occupied a former Scottish Rite temple at 1859 Geary Boulevard in the Fillmore District. At the time, the Fillmore District was a majority black neighborhood and a stronghold of black culture on the West Coast. In Los Angeles, the temple occupied the former building of the First Church of Christ, Scientist, at 1366 South Alvarado Street. By 1972, the temple called Redwood Valley the mother church of a statewide political movement. From the start, the Los Angeles facility's primary purposes were to recruit members and to serve as a way station for the temple's weekly bus trips across California. The temple set up permanent staff in Los Angeles and arranged bus trips there every other week. The substantial attendance and collections in Los Angeles helped support the temple's inflated membership claims. The Los Angeles facility was larger than San Francisco's. Its central location at the corner of Alvarado and Hoover Streets permitted easy geographic access for a large black membership from Watts and Compton. Recruiting drives in Los Angeles and San Francisco helped increase membership in the temple from a few hundred to nearly 3,000 by the mid-1970s. Later, when the temple's headquarters shifted from Redwood Valley to San Francisco, the temple convinced many Los Angeles members to move north to its new headquarters. Although some descriptions of the People's Temple emphasized Jones' autocratic control over its operations, in reality, the temple possessed a complex leadership structure, with decision-making power unevenly dispersed among its members. Within that structure, temple members were unwittingly and gradually subjected to sophisticated mind control and behavior modification techniques borrowed from post-revolutionary China and North Korea. The temple tightly defined psychological boundaries that enemies, such as traitors to the temple, crossed at their own peril. While the secrecy and caution Jones demanded in recruiting led to decreased overall membership, they also helped him foster hero worship of himself as the ultimate socialist. In 1974, the People's Temple signed a lease to rent land in Guyana. The community which was established on this piece of property was named the People's Temple Agricultural Project, informally dubbed Jonestown. The settlement had as few as 50 residents in early 1977. Jones saw Jonestown as both a socialist paradise and a sanctuary from media scrutiny. Said the temple moved to Jonestown because in '74, what we saw in the United States was creeping fascism. End quote. Carter explained, it was apparent that corporations, or the multinationals, were getting much larger. Their influence was growing within the government, and the United States is a racist place. He said the temple concluded that Guyana was a place in a black country where our black members could live in peace. It was a socialist government, and it was the only English-speaking country in South America. Increasing media scrutiny based on allegations from former members placed further pressure on Jones, especially after a 1977 article by Marshall Kilduff in New West magazine. Just before publication of the New West piece, editor Rosalie Wright telephoned Jones to read him the article. Wright explained that she was only doing so before publication because of all the support letters we received on your behalf from the governor of California, Jerry Brown, and others. While still on the phone listening to the allegations contained in the article, Jones wrote a note to Temple members in the room that said, quote, "We leave tonight. Notify Georgetown, Guyana," end quote. After Jones left for Guyana, he encouraged Temple members to follow him there. The population grew to over 900 people by late 1978. Those who moved there were promised a tropical paradise, free from the supposed wickedness of the outside world. On November 17, 1978, Representative Leo Ryan, who was investigating claims of abuse within the temple, visited Jonestown. During his visit, a number of temple members expressed a desire to leave with him, and on November 18th, some accompanied Ryan to the local airstrip at Port Kaituma. There they were intercepted by temple security guards, who opened fire on the group, killing Ryan, 3 journalists, and one of the defectors, as well as injuring 9 others, including Ryan's aide, Jackie Spire. A few seconds of gunfire from the incident were captured on video by NBC cameraman Bob Brown, one of the journalists killed in the attack. Jones ordered his congregation to drink a concoction of cyanide-laced, grape-flavored Flavor Aid. In all, 918 people died, including 276 children. This includes 4 that died at the temple headquarters that night in the Guyanese capital of Georgetown. Some members resisted committing revolutionary suicide and were injected with fatal doses of cyanide, as were infants, and others survived by fleeing through the jungle. Jones himself, as well as his personal aide, Annie Moore, died of likely self-inflicted gunshot wounds. It was the greatest single loss of American civil life in a deliberate act until the events of September 11, 2001.